Bliss, have you realized it's been over a decade?
I have. I actually just realized this about 30 minutes ago when I was thinking about how long has it been since Tanner and I caught up, and I was like, "Holy crap! It's been that long since." Time flies, man. I didn't
Yeah.
even realize. I mean, I've been in LA about 8 years now, and it's felt like maybe a couple of years. It's flown by so quickly.
8 years.
Um,
Where'd you go when you initially got out?
Um, so let's see. So I stayed in Maryland, and then I worked for Apple. I was teaching.
I remember
Um,
that.
yep, for a few years, and something just like inside just kind of just kicked into high gear, like this just massive intuition. And I was like, I have to be on the West Coast,
Yeah.
and I had a house and everything like that. And I was like, okay, so sold the house, sold the car, packed everything I could into like a little pod, and got a motorcycle. Learned how to ride in like 3 months. I kid you not.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And I was like, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna make this the most epic, like close ended to this chapter, and let's
Yeah.
start a brand new chapter, into whatever this new path was. And yeah, I learned how to ride in like 3 months, and then took that across the country over 2 weeks with some friends. Um, Best trip ever. Oh my
I
god.
totally recommend everyone to take a trip across country at least one
Yep.
time and take your
Yep.
time.
Yeah.
Like I did that when I got out too. I left Camp Lejeune and I drove to Seattle and it was just like took my time. I was like, oh look, an asteroid crater in New Mexico. Let's go check that out. You
Oh
know?
my gosh, dude. Yeah, I don't know that I could recommend learning how to ride on a taking a motorcycle, but it's not for everybody for sure. But it was one of the most awe-inspiring experiences of my life for sure.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say that I've done a few different things in my life. It's just there's I read a book actually while I was in when I was deployed overseas in Africa. I read this book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And there are things that you can read in a book, and there are things that you experience in life, and experience is life's best teacher for sure.
Oh,
um,
100%.
and connecting those dots, and there was just there's a lot of fear for sure, because I came over with like I had I know I wanted to work in this industry, in the film industry, entertainment industry, in some capacity. I had zero contacts or anything like that. I have no idea. You just kind of go into the unknown.
You knew that before you got out. You and I
Yeah.
talked about that a
Yep.
lot. And from the looks of it, from where you are now, it's been quite a journey. But
Yeah.
before all that, I want to go a little way back, way back. Usually
Yeah.
we start these with like, when did you decide that the military was the right step for you?
Yeah.
But for you, I even want to go back a little further, because personally, I've been on this jujitsu journey myself. And I know you were an accomplished professional martial artist before you even joined the military. We spoke briefly about it in the Navy, or what, while you were in the Navy, but
Yeah.
that was literally a decade ago.
Yeah.
Uh,
I remember
um,
having this conversation. We were like on our way back from recording something at the House of Representatives one day.
yep.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, and you were going into Wushu, and I was like totally blown away because I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
Now, were you professional in a sense that you were sponsored and all that?
Well, so yes and no. So yes, there was a sponsorship.
Mm,
Um, Wushu doesn't have the legs that it does in China. When I was going through trying to find a place to train, and things like that. But even before that, like I had done martial arts. Let me backtrack it. I've done martial arts since I was like 5 years old.
yeah,
To some capacity, and most of it was just a way, I think, for my parents to get me into something that would, kind of help me feel a little bit of that accomplishment, and have something that I could take with me. And neither one of them knew that I would take it as far as I did. I mean, I didn't even either. I that lots of points throughout that I was gonna quit, and as a kid, you want to try different things or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
But I had gone through. I was one of the youngest black belts in a style called Weichi Karate, which is like an Okinawan, like they call it, like a hard style. And like, so I'd done that when I was like 14, 15.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to quit then, and then I remember I was with my dad. We were driving by, and there was like this kung fu school was opening, and I was like, we used to live in Saudi Arabia, and we did kung fu back then. My dad was a helicopter pilot, so
Okay.
we got
Yeah.
to travel all over the world. I lived in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. We traveled like I was a military brat, but we weren't in the military.
Just working
Um,
for DoD or
no, he was working for different companies that that were helicopter companies that would take him. Like,
interesting.
yeah, when we were in Saudi Arabia, he was flying basically from the smaller hospitals to the main hospital, the K-Kesh, I think is what it's called.
Gotcha.
Uh, so there was lots of a lot of the best jobs were overseas back then, and yeah, so we had done that. I lived in Saudi Arabia for second, third, fourth grade, and we did kung fu back then. And then we got enrolled in kung fu when I again when we were in Florida living there, and there was a new school opening up, and I met one of what I would consider one of my main kung fu like mentors, teachers. His name is Nick Scrima, and I spent the majority of 10 years plus training under him, under his teachers. And it's been a wild ride of just like rediscovering my love of just there's a performance art that I think is missing in the martial arts because and this is no slog to MMA, because it has an amazing place in the sport of it.
Sure.
uh, and I don't think it's an either or. I think that the art of martial arts is still a historically amazing signature in that whole craft, and I really honed in on that. I did fight. I fought, in all kinds, but and I dabbled in there's a style called shuaijiao, which is like a Chinese wrestling style. I did China, which is like joint lock manipulations. I did a little bit of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and there was a lot of things that I did touch on, but my love of it was into the performance art of it. So
So Wushu, because Wushu has a full contact and a performance art, right? Like it's like
Well, Wushu is basically just like a martial art. It encompasses a lot of things, but in the compulsory sport of it, it's basically kind of like the thing I would equate it to would be like a gymnastics floor routine. There are compulsory routines that that you do. There's a lot of history that goes back into it, which is why you'd have to kind of delve into the mythology and the history of Chinese martial arts, which is why they have things like drunken style. But where does that come from? And there's stories that go into the like the Journey to the West stories and the Three Kingdoms and all of
oh
these
yeah,
really colorful characters, right? So that really
yeah.
based down into mythology. Even all of the colorful weapons, like I have a bunch of these like hook swords and things like that, and chain whips and whatever. These are just they were like signatures of battle during the time. But to what extent you're not going to go around flipping around the battlefield when they fought? Everything I'm sure was very straightforward and very practical, but
Yeah.
the stories that were told were the theatrics of it.
Gotcha.
um, and that's where I really fell in love with it. So it's like the there's been some books that really kind of summarize this, and I think this is a link that winds up being my link into my career path to where it is now. But the link of it is that there was a battle that had taken place, and then the survivors would come back and they would tell the stories, and they would say, oh yeah, the fish was this big and we did.
We did flippity jacks instead of
Yeah,
actual combat. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, you should have seen how I took that horse down. Like, and so the theatrics of it, were brought back to the villages, and then they created forms and they created routines and they created styles, and
Interesting.
nobody watched a praying mantis, I'm sure, and was like, you know what, maybe if I put my hands like this and I could really like the, so I think there's a sense of separating the reality and of the use case scenario of it. This is where MMA is like the practicality of it. Bring whatever
Yeah.
you have to the table and let's see how it's used. Totally fine. There is still that art form of it that's just I
The
feel so amazing,
storytelling art form.
and that's the storytelling of it. And
And
Wushu had this amazing just way of telling a story through the beginning of the routine to the end, and how much poise. I mean, they borrow things from the Chinese opera. They borrow things like they borrow things from lots of different cultures too. There was so I remember when I went there, when I went to I'm sorry when I went to Beijing the first time,
Yeah.
there was a capoeira troupe that were coming, that were like, they were professionals that came in to try to work with the coaches, and they were trying to incorporate some of that into their routines, and like figure out what's capoeira all about, and like
Every time I think of capoeira, I think of Bob's Burger. I don't know if you ever seen that episode of Bob's Burger with where
not only the
they
strong
got
with Mark Dacascos. Come on, man.
um, explain the significance of and your experience in training with the Beijing Wushu team.
Yeah. So,
And again, this
man.
is all before you joined the Navy.
So yeah, my first trip over there was a bit of a tourist slash training trip. It was a couple of weeks. We were there with a big group, went and did the sightseeing and all that kind of stuff. And then throughout that, we were also training at the Shichahai Sports School in Beijing, next to Beihai Park, which is like, if you were to look it up, you can place it. Um, and that's basically the predominant sports school that the professional athletes that do taekwondo, that do wushu, that do gymnastics, and they all kind of train at this massive sports school. And one massive level is for wushu. And the Beijing Wushu team is the preeminent wushu team in the world, and it was designed that way.
Sure.
Uh, there's also some huge competitors where, like, Hong Kong and Shanghai, they all kind of work together and train together. And one of the you know preeminent legends in the coaching arena is a man named Wu Bin, and he was known to be Jet Li's coach mentor.
Wow.
He had a few, but he was the one who basically took the Beijing Wushu team to be nothing, and through science and through diet and through muscular training, built them up to be the powerhouse that they are. And kind of really escalated that into the mainstream in China,
Gotcha.
and was able to incorporate the art and science of things. There's a whole I can dive into a
Sure.
lot of where that was into, but um, there's also there's also sport, fighting, and it's called sanda or sancho, and that's basically it's like kickboxing with throws. Some of them, they fight on a raised platform, and you can punch, kick, and throw and off the platform.
Finish
There's
him.
a guy who went into MMA. His name is Kung Lee. I don't know if you remember him.
I remember him.
He,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, he started in Sancho.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like you dove deep into it when you were in it, man.
Hmm.
Deep. So again, like you said, there's a practicality, and then there's the art form of it and the story. I completely love the storytelling aspect of it myself. As a gamer, Romance of the Three Kingdoms,
Oh yeah,
heavily in on that. If anybody has never heard, that story, it's an amazing story.
yeah.
Do you still train and mentor in Wushu?
Currently, no.
Okay,
So there has been my own inner rumblings and talks of definitely going back into it. It's something you never leave, for sure.
sure,
I know myself, and what I tend to do is I tend to zone in on things, and then I get tunnel vision. And
absolutely.
this industry, what well, actually, in the past couple of years, it's really allowed. Um, I've allowed myself to really think through what the future is going to be and what the next chapters are. And I think this is definitely a bookend chapter for a lot of people to start brand new things. And there are new technologies, there's new ways of thinking, and
Yeah,
I think we're in the crux of some really, like, if we were to zoom out and look back on this, for 10 years, we're going to see that this was absolute historic moments, not just because of COVID and things, but I think for a lot of other things. But
gotcha.
so I definitely will go back to find my roots, because I think, and I really believe that there is an importance for all of us to really find our authenticity, and it pays for you to know where you came from and
100%.
really uh, own it.
Yeah,
In That's something I think we can get into for sure. Like, but I think you can look at anything from like YouTube creators and all of the new ways of people that are coming out. Podcasts is a huge example, right?
Yeah.
And uh, and I think that that's a way to really, if you were to think back and find out who you are as a person, you can. Um, that's a way for you to define what your career path
Oh,
can be like.
absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a completely reflective time in history right now. And you're talking about content creators, media, traditional media versus the new way you can get content out to consumers. Yeah, it's all changing. It's all changing.
Yeah.
Um, but you and I started in more of a legacy
Yep.
content back in the day. You were a former broadcast journalist with the Navy.
Hmm.
Where and when during your martial arts journey were you like, okay, yeah, Navy,
Oh
U.S.
yeah,
Navy, that's the next step in my journey?
I know, right?
At what point did you know?
So I was actually going to college, and I had a school that I was teaching at and coaching, and I was also attending. I was going to University of South Florida at the time,
Gotcha.
and 9/11 happened, and I I'd lived in since I'd lived in Saudi Arabia. I lived in the Middle East for 3 years, and I had friends from all over in that area. And I feel like I grew up a very multicultural kid because I had to adapt every few years. And it was a jarring experience to see the divide that happened between different cultures, especially when people are hurt, they're angry, all justified. So it took me a year after 9/11 happened for me to really kind of dive into it. My dad basically said, the military is not for everybody for sure, but definitely check them out. He was in the army,
Mm.
and he didn't spend 20 years in it. He spent 6 years and got out for sure. But he said, You'll never regret your time, doing it. So give it a thought." And it took me a year to finally get around. I was going to art school. I didn't and the I didn't look at it into it terribly. The only thing I knew was, watching Full Metal Jacket, and I was like, I don't want to be part of that. And I don't want to do push-ups all day, and so, but
I want the
um
military without the military.
yeah, what do you
Aspect.
do, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
um and so I took my ASVAB, and my scores were high enough that they were trying to get me into all these kinds of jobs, and it just felt like I was like, I'm getting pushed into this. I didn't want to do it.
Sure.
And uh, you know, there was something inside of me though that just said there's a bigger calling, and it's outside of myself. And when you're young, it takes you a little bit of time to hopefully realize that. Some people figure out that doing things in service of others is the best calling. And I think that that had been inside of me, and it's just something I just had to kind of like wake up to and figure out. But at what direction? There's so many paths, to do
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well,
But anyway,
you had to find your own passion to align with that service.
yeah, where's my use case in that? And like so I went into the Navy, and found that there was that you could be into. I was looking at photography, and I was like, oh, I could do photography, and I was thinking, oh well, if I'm going to go photography, maybe I can join, and be part of like special ops, because I was in that world a little bit already doing it. And a lot of the people that I was training with and doing it, I was like, this sounds like it could be the direction that I was going into. But they found out that the photographers, or the photographer mates, it was backed up for like a year. But there was this thing called JO, and there's no JO at the time, but that was journalists. That was opening up, and that was like, you can go in now. And I was like, now? I was like, geez, I don't know. And I wound up, I wound up going, well, let's sure. And so I didn't think journalism would be the thing that I would go into, because at the time, I didn't really watch the news.
Yeah.
I it's very different case back then, and
Yeah.
so I was like, I don't know that this is the right call. But it wound up being like, I went into it, and went to Dinfos and found out that I remember when getting right out of boot camp and then arriving at Dinfos,
The
like,
Defense Information School for those that don't know.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the school that we all go to. All of the services and civilians, train there as well. And uh, it was interesting because then I saw a bunch of people with cameras, out like shooting photography and with video cameras, and I was going, what is this world? This is not, so I think I was just like knee deep into it at that point. I was like, oh, these are people like me. And and things just started lining up, and I leaned into it heavily. So at Dinfos, I had to do, as part of the Navy contract of it, I had to do both print and broadcast journalism. So that was 6 months of schooling.
Yeah.
So I had to go from one school and then go into the other one.
Yep.
And did you have to do the same thing?
No, we just went through the video production and documentation course. You just like, you're a combat videographer. This is your partition. It wasn't as combined as it is now. All of my MOSs are now legacy MOSs. None of them
Yeah.
actually exist anymore. Combat cameras merged with public affairs, and my old admin merged with another admin. And I like to say I'm old core now, even though I was out within like 3 years, everything was gone. But no, we just went through the 3 month video production documentation, or 4 months. But I remember the Navy
Yeah.
always had to have more school in it. And I think at that point,
Mhm.
they had combined into the mass communication specialist. So you had the broadcast, you had the
Yep.
print, you had the journalism, they had everything. It was like a year.
Yep.
But,
They
but,
consolidated, they consolidated a lot, all of the media jobs into that mass communication. That happened after I got out
yeah.
of Dinfos, right? And so yeah, so did
And we
that,
can,
and
and we can get into the whole politics of that, but I don't know if the podcast
oh
wants
sure,
to.
yeah, no, for sure,
Journalism versus documentation, and the
yep,
how
yep.
they really
The
don't
public affair,
align.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
how. Anyways, um,
yeah. The
so
the so yeah, so what I got, after going through Dinfos, I got top of my class, and so um, so they came up and they said, we're going to, because you did that, you can choose between a few different places you can go. Italy, Japan were at the top of my list, so they sent me to Italy. And then I got to an AFN detachment there and worked as a broadcaster, and I started
Naples or Signella?
Naples.
Naples.
Yep.
Gotcha. Very cool.
Yep.
While you were in, give me either your best friend or your greatest mentor.
Oh man, I had a few,
Yeah,
uh,
that's
for
good.
sure. So one of my best friends, when I was in Italy, is a he was a corpsman, named his name is Thomas Ferguson, and we still talk to this day. And so him and I, actually, that leads into, I made a feature when I was overseas.
Oh wow.
Um, Yeah, so and him and I were the ones that started this. And it started basically where, so when I was at AFN, I did a spot, a commercial spot for the local hospital there, the big Navy hospital that's there, that we're kind of like side detachment to. And we met up and just like nerded out over exploitation movies, over like horror and sci-fi, and like, and I was like, oh dude, I used to do like, all these short films, and we watched all that. And he didn't really know much about filmmaking, so he was just like zoning in of like, let's just do this thing, like you're working in this. And
Because
we
he's a
decided.
corpsman. He's not in public affairs or
Exactly,
politics.
but he
Gotcha.
had a
Gotcha.
love for entertainment and doing that kind of thing. So I was like, yeah, let's do something. I want to shoot, like, we're in Italy. Like, come on, this is, people pay to go here, and I'm getting paid to work here. This is amazing.
Right.
Um, and so yeah, we wound up taking this idea of a short, and over the course of time, there's a longer story to this, but it wound up turning into a feature. um, and it's this like really quirky, like horror dramatic feature that I made over there called The Suffered. Um, him and I were at the crux of starting that whole thing off. And there was an article that was written, I think in the Navy Times, about, like, sailor makes his first horror movie overseas or
Oh wow.
whatever. Yeah. And
Huh.
so it was a huge part of my 3 years there. Um, and my senior chief, who was the head of our detachment, Kevin Carson, is amazing. my gosh, there was it's dizzying because there's a lot of people that I really admired and looked up to. Whether they would be in the military or not, it's just there's a standard of person that I just uh, you know,
Attract, like to be
yeah,
around. Yeah.
yeah,
So, and I think that first enlistment, you always have like really strong bonds with the guys that you just came because you all just came in the military. You're all just kind of new.
yeah,
And, if you click with somebody, you click with them, it seems like for life, it's
yeah.
crazy.
That's true.
Um, was headquarters Marine Corps, that was your last billet, right?
It was my second and my last.
Your
Yeah.
second and your last. How in the heck? And I've always asked this question. I always wondered how in the heck did headquarters Marine Corps combat camera
Yeah,
end up with a Navy billet serving alongside
that's a
and
great question.
right and mentoring young Marines? Did you ever get an
Yeah,
answer? Like, how did you end up with the Marine Corps?
yeah. So, ish. I got an answer. Like, so I found out because 9 months, a year and a half out, I was trying to talk to my detailer about what possible positions would be open up, would be good career paths.
Yeah.
And then there's a much bigger process, as we all know, to get into that, and they try to place you where you're effective but also look at your history of you know
Yeah.
and me being the weird quirky, like, made this horror movie, also did spots for AFN and stories, and I was out in town doing all this stuff, so I just immersed into my environment. And so there was a lot of talk of just like, well, maybe Japan, definitely go out. Usually you go out to sea after that, which is what
Yeah.
my senior and hilariously, my senior chief was saying, like, you need to go to a ship, like go to a ship. They really were pushing me to stay in because I was like, I don't know, maybe this is maybe where I'm most effective, and then maybe I do this. And there was a lot of talk about where to next, and they were really trying to push me
Looking
further
more
into
looking more for your military career than what you're.
that. And also just like I think they just knew me in a way of just saying, like, lean into this, that you have, that there's certain things that I think you will personally benefit from, but you just have to give it a chance, you have to give it a shot. So they
Yeah.
were really pushing me to go out to sea, maybe go into a flagship or something like that, which is kind of what I was looking at.
Yeah.
um and so I was definitely giving that some serious thought. And then um there were also the other two thoughts were uh and I forget what they were called. Is it Defense Info East and Defense Info West?
I have no
There
idea.
were anyways there were two billets that were open up for, I believe it's just for the Navy, for basically a public affairs official to work in the literary
Yeah.
field with Hollywood.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like yeah, the ones that work with New York or LA
Yeah.
and actually work with Hollywood as like advisement for films and television shows and stuff. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
I pick it up what you're laying down. But you did end up at headquarters Marine Corps.
Yeah.
That was a first class billet, right? It was like an E6 billet or an E5 billet.
Yeah.
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 It's crazy. My buddy Nick, he did the same thing in Iwakuni. He was with
Oh,
Marine. Yeah, he was with the Marines. It was like almost like a purple deployed combat camera unit, but in Iwakuni. It was just unique. So
yeah.
you're like the second. Him and Nick, my buddy Nick, are like the only
Yeah.
two that I've ever heard do something like that. It's just
Yeah.
unique. Just unique.
E- Yeah.
Speaking of that shop, the entire dynamic was odd to say
Uh,
the least. To say the
yeah.
very least. Is that the reason that you decided that it was time to punch out?
Um. Oh boy.
We don't have to go into everything that unit was or that shop was.
Yeah. We can.
We can skip all
We
the
can.
nasty.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But was it a factor?
y- um. I would say it. If I was on the line, it definitely was the factor that pushed me over, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um. And there's when I feel like I want to run, but I'm getting shackles put on me, and so I have to crawl. Then I'm gonna, like, gnaw my way out. That's
Yeah. I mean, we can get it. Just there was leadership challenges for the younger
yeah,
Marines there. That's all we got to say. But
yeah.
that was what year did you EAS? It was 2011.
Oh God.
Was it when did you get out? Was it
20
2010?
yeah, 20 January, I think, of of 2010. Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, I remember you were getting into film festivals at the time.
Yeah.
You were doing some horror movie genre stuff. Matter of fact, you were the first person that ever showed me how to submit a film to a film festival with
Without a box. Yeah.
withoutabox.com. You remember that conversation?
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
yeah, do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think you wanted me to submit like the birthday message or something. And I just looked up right before this interview, and without a box is no more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you submit to film festivals now? Are there different ones?
Um, you can submit directly to them. I mean, Google is now pretty much, done a lot of that work.
I did like the access of the film festivals through the portal that was without a box though. That was a unique website.
Convenient. And I
Yeah.
think there was probably a pro and a con to that, because I think, there's a bit of like localizing where you'd want to get if you made a movie in like, podunk somewhere and there was a film festival out there, you could probably get to that. But if you go through without a box, there could be some bottlenecking that would probably happen. This is a total guess.
Gotcha.
And I think the administration of it winds up being more than the execution.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
yeah.
No, it was a great thought. It was a great way to get into film festivals.
Plus, the best film festival exposure you can do right now is YouTube. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
tag it, and there's nobody's going to tell you no. Like, and we can get into that whole thing
Do
now.
it.
But
Tell me. Tag it. What do you mean? So
well,
you put your short on YouTube and you tag it into film. You tag film festivals.
no, well, so the idea of film festivals, right,
Yeah.
is a curated screening by people that believe that these are the movies that fit into their platform that should go within this. And sometimes it doesn't even have to do with how well the movie or the show was produced. It has to do with whether it fits into a certain time slot, right? So if it's a short movie, those short movies are going to fit into more time slots, and they can fit more of them. If it's a feature, they have to curate more and things like that. Well, what happens after that? So the distribution aspect of that is that you go to a film festival and you go to represent your project, and you hope to network, and there's a whole process of networking. That's really what the film festivals used to be about.
Yeah.
And uh the internet just blew that up. I mean, our internet 2.0, I would say, which is like social media, blew that up
Gotcha.
because you could reach out to people on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever it is, social media that you have, and you don't need anybody to tell you no. And the thing is there's just everybody has there's a lot of people now that can tell stories because our iPhones and Pixels and whatever shoot better video than those massive Ikegami cameras that we used to use. And it's
I
like,
you
you know what I
know
mean?
I mean I just took a photo of my eyeball with my new iPhone. I just got a new
Mm,
iPhone like a week
yeah,
ago.
yeah.
And it was amazing. I was comparing it with the eyeball photo that I took with my Android because I blew my eye up in jujitsu and stuff, and
Oof.
I was like, got a poke of the eye and it was all red. So I was like seeing like how it was adjusting, and I was just like, man, this new phone from just a camera from a Samsung 2 years ago to
Yeah,
this new iPhone is just incredible. It's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, and there was and I hate to jump back, but
No,
there
do it.
was there was a time before when I was still in Maryland before I went to as I was going, I need to be on the West Coast.
Yeah.
There was a time where I was kind of going, I actually might want to. I wanted to go either in computer science and delve into that aspect of it, because the camera technology, I think, is a freeing element that was definitely changing. Like, intelligent camera
Yes.
systems were a thing that I was starting to really, really get into, and I was thinking, oh man, maybe if I did computer science, maybe going to MIT's media program or something like that, that might have been the play, and use my GI Bill. And a lot of this was to use my GI Bill in the fashion that we don't know like what happens after that. So um, I applied to both USC and I applied to Art Center out here in California, and then I got accepted into both, and I said, oh wow, this might actually have to be the thing. I didn't find out about USC until I was like on my motorcycle, and I got my last mail, and I got the like acceptance letter. But I had
How'd you get the mail on your motorcycle?
So no, I was like literally packing the last
Oh,
things.
okay.
So I okay, so let me backtrack this. So I was I was packing all of my stuff, and a week before, I had basically put my notice in at Apple and said, "I'm doing this." And I committed to it before I even got my Art Center
Wow.
acceptance.
Wow.
And then I got my Art Center acceptance and go, okay, great. So there's actually I have a direction.
Mhm.
And then as I was leaving and getting the last bit of my mail and packing up my bike with all my camping stuff or whatever, I get this massive like package from USC saying you got accepted, and I was going, oh man, okay. Well, I have a couple weeks to think about this. Let me, you know, and but either way, it was both like in this really
You had a
solidified
mission.
direction.
Yeah, you
I
had a
did,
solid direction that on the West Coast, you had
yeah,
something for you on the other side.
yeah, yeah.
Incredible. So
So
tell me, how did you go from working independently, freelancing, hustling? Again,
yeah,
I'm assuming you had other jobs at the time to doing productions for Buzzfeed. I saw
yeah,
the preview of the NASCAR episode for Squad Wars because
yeah.
um, it was on YouTube Red, but it caught my eye because again, I was in NASCAR productions for a bit, and
Yeah, yeah.
I edited a couple K&N races at Irwindale Speedway. So seeing that definitely caught my eye. But now you're at Bad Robot, which is a
Mhm.
J.J. Abrams studio, huge influence studio in California. A studio has produced major TV shows like Lost, Fringe, Westworld. I also followed Revolution back in the day, loved it.
Nice.
Film franchises like Star Wars, Cloverfield. I mean, Cloverfield for you had been a trip. Mission Impossible. Saw that they're getting into Doctor Seuss and some DC films. How did you go from freelancing, independent stuff, school to Bad Robot?
So
It's big, man.
w-
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. So when I was in film school at SC, that our number one thing, the thing that I noticed, similarly in the way that the first time I stepped foot at Dinfos, when everybody was like, with cameras and things like that. At USC, the first thing everybody did was like, "Hey, I'm so and so. Like, what do you do?" I had never seen any but like aggressively everybody was kind of like we all want to get to know each other
Yeah.
very quickly. And I think there was a little bit of there's a massive camaraderie there within the school. It's a very very hard school to get into. It's harder to get into USC's film program than it is to get into like Harvard. Like the numbers are
Interesting.
ridiculous. I don't know why. I think
Mm.
I feel like, man, open it up to everybody. We all have a story to tell. We can all be trained. It's like,
Absolutely.
but that's a whole other
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, so as I was going through school, man, I was doing 21 credits. I was shooting stuff on the side. We all had to. Like we were just tired for like 3 years. Um, and I was like, I'm gonna dive into my love of sci-fi and horror and video
Yeah.
games and all the nerd stuff that goes back to when I was like a baby.
Yeah.
My mom was like Miss Pac-Man champion of Indonesia, basically, like when she was a kid. Yeah, and
Well,
so like I have the nerd aspect from that, and my dad being a huge influence on sci-fi and that whole aspect and movies and anyways.
and that's where we connected too. All
Yep.
that nerd culture stuff.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I said, I'm gonna teach myself, which I was doing for a while, but I was doing visual effects and editing and writing and directing and blah blah blah. So I just wanted to kind of dive into all of that, and that's where the freelancing bit came in. So I did some music videos. I directed, edited, and did visual effects for a few of them, and I did some visual effects for some other like mini series types of things that really got me experience in just like the production outside of school system, which is obviously where you want to be doing. So, um, and I also learned a lot about. There was a couple of classes that I had taken my last couple of semesters that we were delving into the future of the entertainment industry and
Sure.
how to put together pitch decks and figure out, how the marketing of things were. And that really, I think, is going to be the ultimate payoff for me is the exposure to opening up that door in my head, of where that goes. And like,
The business side of it.
well, there's the business side of it, but and we'll dive into this, I think, in a little bit. But like, there's the side of it of going like, everybody come, that you can come into this industry from all walks of life. Like, you don't need, to go to college and go through in fact, it's probably better that you don't. It's probably better that you come from a place that people haven't really heard of, that you have a unique perspective that other people don't know. Because when you come out to LA, in your uniqueness and your individuality, you want to hold on to that. It's very easy, as we all do. Like, if I go to another place outside of LA, you get sucked into that culture. And the thing is if the hub of the culture of where everybody's writing all the stories all comes from here, then all the stories are going to be the same, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So, and it's not necessarily the case that we all, reach out to everybody in LA to tell stories. So there's just a craft and a business that is solidified out here, to that. So, I think that, like, there's a lot of that influence goes into, thinking about what your career path winds up being. And so I try to do everything, and I still do. So when I way back in the day when I was in Florida, I worked for, when we had video rental houses, I worked for a warehouse that basically sold mass amounts of video, tapes and DVDs to startups, basically, like, that weren't Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, that were like mom and pop video stores.
gotcha.
So I started from that level and doing things from like sell through and figuring all that out. And when I got out here, I said, I could figure out to try to get into a certain aspect of the film industry that would make sense. And I feel like starting from the end, like, maybe not distribution, but out here it's post production,
Yeah,
and working my way backwards,
okay,
into development. And
gotcha.
so that has, I felt, has just been, it's always a learning experience. And it helps guide, I think, the ultimate direction of where it is that I want to start, um, you know telling the next, or going to the next chapter of my experience in my life. And, the way to get into, where I got to, there's no clear path. Like, I freelanced, I networked with a lot of people, and I say network in a very loose scenario because I think the term networking is, very cold and it's not
Yeah,
personal,
yeah,
right? At least
yeah,
that's the way that I translate it. So I hate to use the word, but, we're out here meeting people, and we're out here trying to, trying to meet people that are either like-minded, or we know we want to work together well. And there's a lot of, it's like dating on a massive scale. Yeah, like, you're all just trying to find people that you really can just, like,
gel
link
with
with.
and make something special with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so when I was freelancing, I got to meet a lot of different people, and I got to experience lots of different things. And I have friends from my freelancing gigs that I'm still friends with today, like, for sure. And then the Bad Robot thing came about in a really weird way. So I wound up, because I was reaching out and I'm cold emailing to lots of everybody, like, from different. I just wanted to, it's the same. I do that. You never know. It's a needle in a haystack kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And I had an email, from Bad Robot. I think it was like, there was like an internship, position that was available or something. So, I went into that, when I was still in school. I went to their internship thing, did an interview, and then, got passed. And I was like, okay, well, that's not going to happen. So I kept going on with my life, did my thing, kept working in the industry. And that's when I went and worked at Buzzfeed. So I worked in post production, and then, was a coordinator. So I started coordinating on that level. And then, I also did a show for Vice, and coordinate on that level. And then when I was there, I reached out to a few different companies, and I'd all had really, really good meetings with them, including Bad Robot. And, then there was just that situation where it's like, man, I love, I'm a huge fan of Bad Robot as a culture.
Yeah.
Um, I can say that I'm a Star Wars fan, but I can't say that I'm the biggest Star Wars fan, which is like, ah. But the thing is that, the J.J. Abrams brand of, like, mystery and optimism, and, this, like, adventure and this sense of openness, and, like, it's not just in, I can tell you, just being there, and it is run like a family business. They're all super genuinely amazing people. And I think the thing is that, going through all my series of interviews to get there, and then also with others, there was definitely choices, that hard choices, because yes, they're amazing, and then these other people that I wanted to work with were also amazing, other people that I like really looked up to, and I was in a really good position, like,
Yeah.
to have some of those choices. Can't tell you how I got there. Like, it's just a matter of, like, you got to dive in, and you have to kind of like figure it out, because everybody does in a different way. And this is a way that kind of worked for me. It's just meeting the people, and the people met, and then we kind of go like, yeah, we're aligned.
It sounds like you were just you were going to school, and then at the same time you were hustling, grinding, and just being a genuinely good dude while you were doing it.
I hope so.
Like really just kind of putting it out there and be like, look, this is who I am. This is what I want to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
What do you think? What's up? Interesting. Very, and you were cold emailing people. That's
Oh
that's
yeah, I would cold email, and I wanted to, the, you don't go out. I didn't come out here to think that I was going to come out here and make a gazillion dollars. None of that was ever like, if I want to do that, honestly, I probably would have stayed within the military system in
yeah,
some form or fashion. Not saying I'm going to make $1 million in the military, but something that is of like a comfortable, very solidified way of starting my career path and doing whatever it is. And I can make movies on the side if I wanted to and do
yeah.
that. I came out here to open up and take whatever that next adventure was, and it could have led me, in a very different path for sure, but you just don't know until you get there.
What made you go? Okay, I want to take the uncomfortable,
Oh man,
because I think that's really important.
it is. uh I've never, and maybe this is just a product of me moving every few years from radically different cultures. We I When I moved to Saudi Arabia, I was 8 years old, and I was living in Glendale, California. And my dad comes back home, and he says, "We're moving to Saudi Arabia." And I was like, "Saudi Arabia? Is that a desert? Am I going to be living like in the desert?" Like, I mean, I'm 8 years old. I remember distinctly that I was saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be like camels." Like, that's all I knew. Like, I had no idea. And
Alibaba, Aladdin. That's
yeah, I
yeah,
didn't know. Like,
yeah.
I had no idea. And and obviously living in the Middle East during those times, and getting to meet some really amazing people,
Yeah.
and I don't know, like that experience changed, but
Yeah.
that's every three. It happened like every 3 years or so. Like,
So adventure was kind of in your family, taking that next
oh
leap,
yeah, my
taking
dad,
it. And
yeah.
I think in a primal way, like guys aren't, or no, guys, people aren't meant to be comfortable in general, you know?
uh Comfort never really, it, you don't grow from comfort.
No, no,
You grow from, being uncomfortable, and that go and doing things that are outside of the norm. And that's always been the case, especially in my life. And
100%.
you have to be able to zoom out, and I think look at the core. What is your core value, and be able to stand by that and utilize that. And I think when you do that and you find out who you are, I think that's the hardest thing for people to do, is understand who they are. Um, and when you do, then that, I think, is when you go forward and just kill it.
100%. Couldn't have said it better. What's your role on most projects with Bad Robot? What do you do there at Bad Robot?
So when I first got there, I was in a very technical capacity. There was, it's interesting because I have a role there. So technically, I have some coordinator roles. I also help coordinate and manage our vendors relationship, with a lot of the back end stuff, like we have a couple of theaters there, and projection systems, and I work with these guys. So there's a largely technical role that I have there. And when I first got there, it was a matter of utilizing what I knew about the system, learning their system, and then streamlining it. So over the course of a few years, as we were, and I didn't know we were like, uh, Star Wars, when we were doing Rise, there was a big time that I could help revamp our system so that it was streamlined, hopefully like next generation, and and know that there were going to be some kinks that we were going to work through. But the overall thing was that there's this growing level of where we're going to go to next, and I'm very proud of the work that we did there. We basically utilized a whole KVM system that allowed us to network computers so that you could be in an editorial room and be able to work on a machine that wasn't in the room, because those machines were all linked up through fiber optics and SDI cables and things like that. We had 5.1 mixing rooms. So if we brought in new editors and things like that, we could just assign them to rooms as long as there was a fiber connection. I
Yeah.
worked with some really, really great people to do a lot of that. And that was a huge, huge setup. So I did a lot of that. I was also on set when we would do reshoots, which was amazing.
Really, really important part of the IT work is that you get to learn the entire building. You get to learn
Yeah,
the
oh, yeah,
entire process, and then you can kind of show your talents, and at the same time know that the technical part of it helps you show the talent of your artistic side if you do it right. I had a buddy,
yeah,
Brett. He started out in IT at NASCAR. Now he's a freelance producer doing amazing things. But he started out in that NASCAR building doing the IT work, doing and he just knew the system so well. He was able to be
yeah.
more efficient than anybody else. It's great.
Yeah, and I think for me, I mean, I'm a huge nerd anyway, so like
Yeah.
there was we were on the first show that I was on was Cloverfield Paradox. And there was one night we were doing reshoots, and there was a system that I was trying to build, uh, and I did it like last second because we had to render a bunch of red raw files, and I was like, I think I could do this outside of using like their red native card. I think I could do this and almost get real time proxy outputs
Wow.
so that editorial could work there. So that like on that night, I was like building this whole new system and outputting real time proxies from the raw footage that we were. It was just like it was super fun.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's the type of work that I do there. And I work and now over the last few years, I've also I work in our production department.
Great.
And we have there's a few of us that are in the production that and basically it's like there's a lot of the hiring of the heads of departments and things like that. So there's a lot of meetings that I get to be a part of, and you know
It's great that they've seen you in the technical side, the IT side, and then and also recognize the artistic side and able to pull you into a different. Like I see a lot of production houses not being able to move people like that within that, based on what their strengths and weaknesses is or what their desires are.
yeah.
It's nice to hear that there's a production house that does that.
I mean, I have nothing but amazing things to say about
Yeah.
everybody at Bad Robot for sure, and it's definitely comes from a genuine place. The thing is that there's a garage band mentality, I think, like a scrappiness that is there, but also because there's such a huge front face, like everybody knows about them. I mean, it's like you would think that this would be massive, massive amounts of people, but
Yeah.
it's really a family unit, and they run it as such. Um,
Yeah, because that's great. Because it's great to hear that. Because, like I said, I see a lot of the production houses kind of like a lot in the military. Oh, we need them there because that's their assigned bill, and we can't lose that person in that role, so we're going to keep them there. But it sounds like they're able to be
yeah.
more malleable. That's good stuff.
And I think that's probably how they tend to look at a lot of the people that they look at hiring. You look at people, you hire people, like, and you
Yes.
hire and I think I would imagine what they saw in me was that like I have a lot of different interests and accomplishments that I think I could bring to the table. I've also done some visual effects shots and things like that when we've needed to in a scrap, and
Oh, that's great.
um, yeah, so like it's definitely a lot of that I think that wound up taking me to it. Now the thing is that I would feel that anybody that is listening would go and try to find what their unique capabilities are and figure out where it is they fit. I have gotten a lot of questions of like, okay, so how did you get into there? And then they try to mimic the process of getting to that point. It's like, no, no, no. Look, if I were to do this now, like if I were to say that I'm living in somewhere and I need to redo this now, we're in a radically different age.
Yeah.
There, my whole path would have been different.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
what principles would you say you still need to have in order to get to where you need to be or where you
um,
want to be?
so the thing that I
If
think is
if
gonna,
not if not the right if not the certain path.
the thing that's carried me has been insatiable curiosity about everything. Um, that is the thing that I hope never dies within myself. Like I hope I'm not 90 years old going like, the metaverse, NFTs. I don't know. I'm just
I like my VCR, you know.
my VCR. Hey, I love my VCR. I still have it.
That's
Um,
outstanding.
yeah, but no, I think insatiable curiosity and the courage to pursue it is that should be the thing that everybody, if they want to be outside of a system that, everybody's got their motivations for doing the things that they do, and it's just, what's your call to action, and that's what it is, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%. So a decade out of the Navy, decade out of
yeah.
service, you've gotten to this point. What do you want to accomplish in the future? What goals do you still have in this industry?
Oh man, I don't even feel like I feel like I'm just starting, like,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's especially now, because there was so a few friends of mine, we'll talk about crypto because I think this is where it ties in.
Okay.
Um, so we're in this really interesting phase right now with cryptocurrencies, right?
Yeah.
Technologies, NFTs, and things like that.
So this is
And
another interest that you have too.
oh, massive now.
Gotcha.
I wasn't, but it ties into
Everything.
literally the every yeah.
Gotcha.
So if I were to be a betting man, my bet is that, we are going to be moving into a very decentralized future, and that decentralization, and I'm not just talking about like the financial markets, who knows, but I'm talking about the philosophy of how we approach everything. We're already heading that way. Like, YouTube is a place that you can post and learn and do everything, and it's all coming from, the long tail of things. The decentralization is the niche thing that I'm into. I can find a market for it, and I can find an audience for it. It doesn't have to be, theatrical level audiences for it. It just has to be like a small niche, and I can make a living at it.
Okay.
We never thought that we would be playing video games and people would be making a living, and a good living too, streaming video games. But if you look historically, you could say, oh, well, that came from the old radio DJ days, and then those went away, and so now there's a market for that. But no, you can say yes at a very basic level, but people playing video games and streaming content and giving their own perspective on things is a whole nother level of what that decentralization is looking like. Um, and the way that cryptocurrency is like kind of played into it for me, and I would just say crypto just because, it stands for this thing, like, the pandemic happened, and I think, we all started working from home. We're all figuring out what this new future is going to look like. There's also like there's people either going back to work, there's people like hybridizing things where they're working at home and they're working at work, and the 40-hour work week is kind of getting explored in different ways, and we're all
Yeah.
just trying to figure that kind of stuff out. So that's happening. And I didn't really get into crypto until the pandemic hit, because that was the change agent that I think was kind of needed to happen in order for that to, because my friends have been talking to me about it for a bit.
Oh, my wife has been talking about it 10 years ago, and I was like, and
Oh,
when she was in college,
yeah.
like before, like 2005 or seven, she was like, "Oh yeah, this thing called crypto." We
Oh,
won't buy
dude.
anything. Can you imagine if we did? Crazy.
Right. I mean, we're still, it's still early. I mean, it's the investment side of it is still very, very early.
Gotcha.
Um, Now, like yes, sure, we could have invested really, really early. Nobody would have understood if we were to be able to go back in 10 years from now, like, and to go, hey, look, there's this thing, crypto. Like,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
financial systems are going to be changed, but really, you're not even going to can't comprehend it. It's like going back in like the 80s and going like, hey, there's this thing called the internet, and you have a phone that looks like the tricorder, like the Star Trek thing, and you're going to be able to do everything. And you're gonna be like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, there's no
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need what do I need the internet for? I have my whole wall of Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah. Let me go back to my Back to the Future. Quit watching Back to the Future. It's
Yeah, right? So, it's hard to try to guess what that new future is gonna be like, but I think
yeah.
the trajectory, it really is a holistic approach that I take, is that, um, the trends of seeing content creators online doing the things that they do are going to be and are like absolutely fundamental to figuring out what your career path is in
Yeah.
not just this industry, but in any industry that you want to be in any kind of creative, storytelling sort. I think that people that are screenwriters, let's say, can't just be screenwriters.
No.
Like, you gotta know how to write in the format of a novel. Let's say you have to broaden. You have to think IP.
Yeah.
You have to think in those terms of, yes, I'm a screenwriter and I'm also a comic book creator and also a video game designer and
You
like,
got to be multidisciplined now. It's
yeah.
just the way it is.
I mean, think about it, the thing is too is like, look, like Unity and Unreal development kits. These are game creation kits. They're used in the film industry and also in the video game industry and lots of other, you know, and
Applications.
those are free. And how do you learn it? You go on YouTube, spend a day, and you've got it.
And there's a whole industry on training people on how to use it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you're talking about decentralization in media and in art and I had this conversation with another Navy veteran, Jonathan Kingham. He's a songwriter out in Nashville, and he talks about the decentralization and being songwriting now that's all digital versus the days where you could write a hit song and pay for your grandkids college.
Hmm.
Do you think the decentralization of the arts or media, yeah, it's going to give a nice middle ground where you can make a living,
A
but the
hundred percent.
highs and lows aren't going to be there like they used to be.
Um,
Like there's like the Beyonces, the really top earners, where it's more now going to be more. There's going to be more people involved, but it's going to be less top.
Um, I tend to think that we live in like we are, and it's hard to think about right now just because of the state of things. But I do definitely think we live in a post scarcity, world.
Yeah,
Um, so
less
it
gatekeepers too.
oh yeah, zero gatekeepers. And so, um, there are industries built around, the Beyoncés of the world, and Billie Eilish right now. Like, there's definitely industries that are built, and they're always going to ebb and flow.
Yeah,
um and I would say that those are circumstantial. Like, there's a lot of things that lead up to that. I mean,
sure.
obviously massive amounts of hard work, decades of experience. Look, Joe Rogan is a perfect example. Here's a guy that, like, people knew from Fear Factor or whatever, and like, he did some comedy, and he had all of his Venn diagrams. But if you were to go up to an executive and say, put together the pitch deck for Joe Rogan, there's no way you would have guessed that.
That
And
he would
yet,
be like
look at
the Oprah Winfrey of podcasting.
he's the Larry King. He's the
Yeah,
Larry King of our day. He's like
yeah,
but look, he wouldn't even know that. Like, and the reason is that he approaches things from his unique perspective, what only he can do, and he's able to build that audience over decade of experience and time. And he approached everything from insatiable curiosity, and he just is he's super curious and open about people.
yeah,
And yet, like, look where he is now. Like, and he's one example, and he's not the only one, but he's the one that a lot of people can just go, okay, I could put a name to that. There's lots of, and then look at the podcasting space, blew up. And, you could say, yeah, he caught the wave and did the thing. He's not the only one.
no.
Lots of people are doing that. Um, but
And he diversified his marketing. He went into video, he went to YouTube, he went to now Spot.
sure.
So he's not just doing one little niche podcast thing. He's
Yeah.
he's making sure he's got a whole marketing platform behind him.
Diversification, I think, is you have to, you have to, let me, if I were to go back to, like, I go back to those classes that I took at USC that were really more about entrepreneurship. um, and it was the thing that I knew that I was always into. Like, I was always into the idea of, like, when I lived in Saudi Arabia, I took a computer class where I made my own game, and I made it in DOS, like, back then. And it was like, it was an eye-opening experience of going like, oh cool, I could make this. I made like a basketball pong game.
Oh, nice.
And so I thought about that and I go, okay, cool. So I can make this thing, and then you know I would not have revisited that for decades later.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going back and going like, look, all the things that I'm into, the things that I want to do, I want to approach from that aspect of just like being fierce about it in a way that I'm excited, because
Yeah.
that's really, at the end of the day, it's like you could go back to that philosophy of like, you look, you got one life to live, and like this is the thing. And we have more opportunity now than we've ever had. Um, and the you cannot see the forest through the trees like until like you zoom back out and look at it and you go, oh my gosh, all the things that led up to me being me, I could utilize in this sense, and I can share it with people that are like minded, and you will find your audience. And when you find your
Yes.
audience, it's not about the money,
No.
you know
There's a lot of
um
self fulfillment for that. I mean,
yeah.
you talking about Rogan, man. I would just be happy to be the James Lipton of the military community, honestly.
James Lipton, nice, yes, right. How amazing.
um, so where do
Yeah,
you? So again, real
yeah.
quick,
So
crypto. Where do you want to? Where do you want to? What goals do you still
so
have?
NFTs and smart contracts are a really great model that we're all on the very ground level of figuring out. And I think, in this industry, you could look at NFTs as a sort of way. Their NFTs are like just a little bit of like a backstory. Non-fungible tokens that basically allows metadata to be attached to digital property that would allow it to be tracked on a certain way that you could make smart contracts on. And a smart contract would be, how about this? We take this podcast, you mint an NFT out of it, right? So basically, you put it on a crypto platform, which allows the metadata and the whole system to holistically work. And you say, okay, cool. We 10 years down the line, you and I are blown up, we're doing our thing or whatever. We say, you know what? If you originally bought that podcast, um, you could get, we could meet up for lunch. We could do this, whatever. And then that person or those people that bought it go, oh my gosh, I actually own that thing. They look in their digital wallet and they go, yeah, cool. I'm down for that, whatever it is. And that's tracked. So that's kind of where we're figuring out what those are. Now I say you and I, like as if anybody's going to want to sit down and have lunch with us 10 years from now. But
Hey, you never know.
regardless, you
Yeah,
never know.
never know. That metadata, is it like what we would do when we caption a file in Bridge or something? Or is it
Oh, yeah,
I,
yeah. Like on a huge, no, you're right.
am I?
Yeah. So think about it. It's metadata on steroids in a way that is securely tracked, and the monetization of it is huge. They're trying to figure out right now the collector space in NFTs, but really the value add is in content creators moving forward. So yes, we can add and we can make something on YouTube. We can make something on this and that. There is a distribution platform that is open to everybody, and I guarantee you, you put something on YouTube, and if it's worth something, people will see it. I guarantee you. Like that's the thing, right? So your audience is now like free. You don't have to pay. There's no paywall to get into it. So do that. Post on Instagram. Find your audience. Uh, that is the number one thing. So uh, if I were to relate it back to me, I would say that like there are things that I'm working on right now. Like for instance, I just finished my rough draft on a sci-fi horror book that I'm looking at, going like, do I want to approach a, here's the use case of it. I did something that's my own IP.
Sure.
And then I go, okay, what do I do with it? Do I approach the traditional publishers and literary agents? Sure. Do I want to do that? Maybe not. Why? Because there are so many other brand new platforms that I could be on the ground level of figuring out, which might be in the long run of it more beneficial. In the short run of it, if I go with the literary agent, I have a small chance that somebody goes, "Oh yeah, we'll distribute your book," and then they get to take care of that. I kind of want to be part of the new part of figuring that out. It would have been awesome to be on the ground level of being a YouTube creator or something and making
Yeah.
content. It would have been on the ground, that. So that's
Ground
kind of
level
where
of
I
Amazon when they were doing the
sure,
self-publishing.
yep.
Yeah.
So I think that it's the merging of the technology and the creative that I think that is really fascinating for me. And again, I go and I approach that with insatiable curiosity, and I have very little fear of the unknown. Um, and so I think that just finding those things out and just digging through it and cracking open that door and seeing what that new thing is, it'll never go wrong. Approach it smartly. Like, I wouldn't like take all of my money and just go like, this is it. That's a bet.
Dogecoin, $100,000.
Dogecoin. Hey, look, people that invested in Doge, I invested in Dogecoin when it was 7 cents and it blew up to like, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
Shiba Coin now. It's a ridiculous, like, crypto is in a crazy place right now, for sure. The volatility is expected. We won't get into the financial side of it because it's a whole thing
dude. But
that.
that's a whole nother podcast.
Oh
A
yeah,
whole
and
nother.
everybody's trying to predict it. It's hilarious. I watch all these people. They're like, I knew this was going to happen, and then when the 10 other things that they said were going to happen didn't happen, it's like nobody can predict what's happening.
Yeah.
That's fine, but zoom out and look at it. Another person I love to listen to and follow is Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yes.
He has Gary V. So he talks a lot about NFTs and smart contracts. Kevin O'Leary is also, jumped in and he's like, okay, yeah, there's this thing with cryptocurrencies, but really NFTs and smart contracts, like that's so I say that now, and then I would love to revisit this a year or two from now
Yeah.
and go like, did this age well? And I would make a bet that this is going to age very, very well, because the thing we don't realize is what the internet 3.0 is going to be, and that's crypto, in the sense of this decentralization, in the sense of being able to have a trackable system that allows people to be holistically joined into things that aren't manipulated by just a few different things that can be, it's a much more holistic approach, I think, to a lot of this, that I don't know everything there is to know about it, for sure, and I don't
Yeah.
have to. I just have to kind of like take the philosophy and go, okay, yeah, I think this is the way. I'm excited about more diversified storytelling. I'm excited for more people from different walks of life being able to tell their story. I would love to see, movies or short films or books or even like novellas or graphic novels or whatever it is, games designed by, people from all over the world, of a one or two person team. I would play that. I would watch that.
So much passion and it goes into stuff like that. So
And
much passion.
there are distribution avenues for it, and now with the smart contracts and NFTs of things, um, they will be able to be compensated in a way that, I think is sustainable for the foreseeable future, for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
We need to dive into more of that, you and me.
I hope that's not too heady, because it is
No,
very heady. Like,
I personally haven't dug into it, and of course I've been like everybody else. I've heard the word NFT. I've seen
yeah,
crypto and going, oh, that's interesting. I have, from a journalistic sense, I have seen the centralization
yeah,
try to pull it back to being a more centralized thing, and that fight that there is that between decentralization and the centralized community. That part to me right now is fascinating. Hasn't seen that fight, and I'm wondering who's going to win before I jump in. But that's just me. But hearing you talk about it, man, it's definitely you've obviously have been tracking a lot more than I have. You've been inspired more than into the decentralization. It's good stuff. I want to continue that offline if we get a chance.
of course.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, like, the end of the day, what brought me into this world has always been about telling stories, right?
yeah,
So, you want to be able to tell the most authentic story that is, to you, because you realize what your unique value is, and that value add is, if you can, tell this story. Like, if I came up with writing Dune, then I would have came up with writing Dune. And look at now, from the mid 60s, when Frank Herbert wrote that, like, and look at what we have now, like, so more of that can happen. I don't think that there's going to be like, oh, we can't have too much really great sci-fi. Like,
I
no,
mean, yeah,
more.
Lord. I mean, you can go back even further. Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Tolkien. I mean, that was World War One stuff.
Yep.
Um, okay, back to content creation.
Yeah.
When you have the freedom to go and work on a role within a project, what is your favorite role to fill? Because you have fulfilled many different roles in my different projects.
Yeah. Um, I so writing.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Writing has been the thing that I've been very obsessed about. I used to, not very long ago, I was going, I need to write the screenplay because I want to try to get this thing made, and I got to look for funding, and it just wound up being like, yeah, I could do this, but all the stories that I wanted to tell were like, I could not help myself thinking of the dollar signs that it would take, or the the manpower to like get it all. So I go, you know what? I need to free write. I need to like think of this in this way. So like the novella, the episodic could be done in the writing stages, and I'll figure out what that is if I need to visualize it in a
But you
way.
wanted to get the arc out there.
I needed to get my world building and my stories and my characters, and I think that, which is crazy because at the end of the day, like no matter what we create in the future, writing, like the most basic thing of putting a pen or pencil to paper and world building and coming up with something from nothing, that is the gestation point of anything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Video
that's what I'm
games, movies, it all started with a story.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And so writing has been my the thing that I used to go in and out of because it was just like it was the daunting process. I didn't know where I wanted to do like, and the last few years it's been nonstop for that. So writing, and then spending my time just learning all of the new cool. Like I'm learning Unreal right now, the
Oh
Unreal
wow.
Engine,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal. Real time rendering, being able to do like CG and would not have to wait like a week for a shot to render.
And
Like
then oh, it's off by a frame.
yeah.
Having to re-render it.
Oh man. Yeah.
um, is horror, alien, sci-fi, the unexplained? It still sounds like it's your favorite genre.
Oh yeah.
What are you researching right now in that genre?
So uh, the book that I have, that I did has a lot of the basis in underground military bases and the conspiracies around that,
I dig
like
it.
the Phil Schneiders and the Dulcie and whatever.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So that's not something recently that I've been doing. I've been very obsessed with that since for a long, long, long time.
Well,
And
it harkens back to your military background and some of the things, and not, I mean, not the fact that you haven't been to Area 51 or anything, but it's just the fact that
I
you were
have,
in there. What?
well, not Area 51, but when I did my motorcycle trip, I rode through Rachel, Nevada.
Okay.
Nevada, sorry. My friend corrected me. It's not Nevada, it's Nevada. Um, and yeah, I actually took my motorcycle. So my friend Steve and I were both massive alien conspiracy fans. The world build is amazing. Bob
Yeah.
Lazar, Phil Schneider, all these things. So like during the motorcycle trip, I went through Rachel, Nevada, and there's a little place there. That town is Rachel, which is like hardly anybody lives there, and they have a little stop there because like 140 miles of road, and that's it. And there's a little stop there called the Little Ailey Inn, and that's like
So
the mecca for the work. Like a lot of the
the
big people have gone there and done that. So
uh,
I yeah, rode my bike through Area 51. I can
that,
say.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. You should come with me to Washington State and hunt for Bigfoot. I'd be
Oh,
down.
dude.
I live in the Pacific Northwest on that. I got acreage out there in the
Oh,
national rainforest. Anything to get me back
amazing.
there, I'm down.
Let's
Um,
do it. I'm totally down.
all right. You should
Um,
you should also link up with Jennifer Marshall. Do you know Jennifer out
I
there?
don't.
She was my Halloween episode back in 2020. That's a good episode if you're listening to this. It's in the archives.
Okay.
We talked about all this kind of stuff because she's not only an actress, but she's also a private investigator, and she explores all this kind of stuff on her show Mysteries Decoded on CW. She's been on a few episodes of Borne the Battle. Actually, she's also a Navy veteran. So
Oh,
she's out there.
fantastic.
She's out there in your neck of the woods. You should definitely.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah.
This is how much of a nerd I am. So when I was freelancing, I was on a Vice show, and we were working in these offices that shared with other productions. So I'm walking by, and there was I hearing out of one of the editorial bays, like when ancient alien theorists believe, and I'm like, wait, somebody watching Ancient Aliens? And I was like, and I stopped and I kind of like knocked on the door, and then one of the editors looks out, and they're working on like one of the episodes. I was like, no way, are you guys editing Ancient Aliens in
You
here?
totally marked out. You totally marked out. That's
I
awesome.
totally, yeah. And my my supervisor, he was like, man, you nerd. Like you got to know, you don't
Well,
understand.
but when you have a passion for that kind of stuff, you just sometimes you just gotta let it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Speaking of the veteran community, speaking of Jennifer and stuff, in the film and television industry, did you get involved in VME, Veterans and Media and
I did.
Entertainment? Gotcha. Or any of the VSOs out there?
Hmm.
Jennifer said it helped her find that tribe and supported during her initial military transition. Did you experience the same thing?
Yeah. So I initially hooked up with VME for a few different things, and yeah, they're very helpful. The community's great. I did a couple of workshops. I'm sorry, I did a workshop. Yeah, I did a couple of workshops for them um, last year. Talking about my experience and things too, just to kind of give back a little bit.
Oh, very cool.
Um, and initially when I was getting going, they helped out with a couple of, they had a couple of like, hey, this executive from whatever would meet with a bunch of people. So I went to a few of those, and it was it was great to any chance to get to meet people, meet veterans that are going into it, and things like that has been it was really good.
You
And
would recommend doing stuff like that when you're out there, like
oh
going to.
yeah,
Gotcha.
all of it, any and
Yeah.
all of it. Like if you like, there's yeah, the recommendation comes from like you utilize your local community for sure. You don't have to come out to LA. If you want to work on the big fancy projects, sure, like then come out to LA and get that going. Just it's a very very small tight knit community for sure. Like it's just that's how it is. Like every community I think is kind of like that.
Yeah.
Um, and but I think that if you don't have a veterans and media and entertainment in your area that you could utilize, then start one, start a meetup, start a thing. You have to find your local community. Like that's
Me and Paul, there was a guy that was in the military, Paul Porter. Him and I were like the Charlotte chapter. It was just for us for about a year. It was just like just us in Charlotte, like we're the
yeah.
Charlotte chapter. Definitely. And then we got involved in like the Charlotte film scene. But yeah,
Oh great.
yeah. So VME is definitely absolute. It's good that you recommend that you get out and
Absolutely.
network and just meet
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, yeah. There's also like places. We work with Mission Continues as well. They've been awesome. So it may not be necessarily that you work in like if there are veteran related organizations that you could link up with. It doesn't necessarily have to be in entertainment and media. Like, you approach it from a standpoint like, look, we all love stories, we all love movies, and this is why the industry is the way it is. Like we all love to watch, so
Yeah.
we're all fans at the end of the day. You find your community and you start linking up with at that point. You'd be surprised.
Interesting. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Um, is there a veteran in the veteran community or a veteran nonprofit that you've worked with or whom you've had an experience with that you'd like to mention?
um, there's a friend of mine who was doing great work, and he works in this industry. I met up with him, a guy named Tony Bari, prior Marine, and he does really really great work in the documentary field.
Oh, yeah.
And so I met up with him when he was still over at Fox, and early days when I was freelancing and doing his thing and doing my thing, and he was teaching a thing for you know editorial and Adobe Premiere and things like that. Um, and I remember that I came in with all of my toys basically. Like I had my laptop and my like editorial like we do.
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah. All your
and
gear. All your gear.
yep, yep. And and he kind of like he kind of pinpointed me out a little bit. So he was like, "Oh man, like he's a nerd too." And he and then when I met him, I saw that there was like some of the documentary work that he did. Like he did this this really moving documentary work that I'm not sure what he's doing now, but he did one on in from Southeast Asia, and some of the issues that they were dealing with when it came to going how they dealt with a not a hurricane, but like there was
Tsunami.
a tsunami, the experience that they had over there, and how they were all, and it was such a personal story, um, and it was fascinating because like I don't recall that he did media work, I think, in the Marine Corps, but he like yeah, he did what he did outside, and what he's doing now
Was
is
so beyond what he was doing in the military.
yeah, yeah,
Gotcha. Very good.
yeah. So
Very good.
he's a great dude.
Gotcha.
But like there's man, yeah, there's definitely like a lot of people, um, that here's the weird part. Like I know a few veterans. Actually, there's a couple that one of them is out here. Do you
Who's
remember
that?
Tony
Which Tony?
Ortiz?
Jeez. Why does that sound
Did you?
familiar? Jeez. He left right before I got there.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I might have seen him for like a week.
Oh, okay. So there was
Yeah.
a transition. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Anyways, he's out here.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Doing his thing.
Yeah. He's doing music. He's also doing like engineering on the live end, and he's got his own studio and everything like that. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So it's dizzying because there's a lot, and it's strange because even people that I was deployed with, there were two people that I was when I was stationed with when I was in Italy, and they both made it over here and worked out here in LA for a bit. One of them's still out here. I think the other one moved back for a bit.
Gotcha. Very cool.
I think my senior chief is out here. Like it's really strange.
So it's a bigger veteran community than one would think out there.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Well, it's we've covered a lot of ground, Andrew. We've gone about an hour and a half. Is there anything that I've missed or haven't asked, or is there a parting shot that you have to someone that's listening to this that you'd like to share?
I think that the thing about being a veteran is that, you are part of a community with people that believed in something greater. And when you get out, some people feel a little bit lost because they're not necessarily part of that active community
Mhm.
anymore. Um, and I think when people realize that they had a calling for a reason and they embrace what that thing that drives them forward is, that to think about that as like your realized like potential is huge. And that's the thing that I thought that people in the veteran community just had always been so great at doing is pursuing that, that potential. uh and I think that is the number one thing that I think till the day I die will always be, if I were to like be on a loudspeaker, is, find who you are and fulfill that potential. um because it will catch on like a fire, and other people around you would be surprised at who you could affect and who you could inspire to do the same, and we'll all benefit from it.
Again, couldn't said it better myself. Well, let's link up after this. Let's look for some Bigfoot and
Yeah, for
let me
sure.
know, man. Appreciate you, and we are out. Have a good one.
You too, dude.
We gotta get 'em one way or the other. Machine gunner, firefight, bullets fly, day and night rain. Simplified, till we die, another campaign. My desk is a rock where the drug lords cut up millions. My pen is a 7.62 round that'll cut 'em down in an instant. Point, click, pull the trigger to the tune of falling brass. Full benefits and a purple heart and a Russian-made bullet in my back. Raining down lead, punching that clock. Get 'em boys, I'm laying down cover. Machine gunner, firefight, bullets fly, day and night rain. Simplified, do or die, another campaign. Here we go, lock and load, 0331, lug 1,000 rounds, and I ain't bringing back one.